and welcome to our final coverage from this series from the City of London Cemetery. And I thought I'd start us off with the pretty little round dissenters chapel right at the end of St Andrew's Road. The dissenters were those of no particular faith and or of varying faith. And it's a little round chapel, not very big. I'll walk you around it. And this video, after we've seen the chapel here, basically covers random graves that I've been interesting ones, but random graves that I've been able to find while walking around the cemetery. This little chapel was built in 1855 by William Hayward, the designer and architect of this cemetery. Through there you can see its rounded window. It's got some lovely architectural details in it, this cemetery. I know cemeteries aren't the happiest of places, but this is one of London's oldest and is a very fine one. Beg your pardon, my hay fever is really playing up at the moment, and that is the rounded window that we saw from the back part. Show you some of its architectural details. And as I say, this one was built in 1855 for dissenters and was built by William Hayward, the architect of the cemetery. And it really does have some fine architectural details. Built in the medieval Gothic style. It's a very fine little building, isn't it? I know it's not the happiest of buildings, shall we say, because of what it does and what it specialises in, but I wanted to start this video off with that. And for our first grave that I'll be covering, it's not a random one, but it is one that I've done an entire series on, so you'll be joining me further up that way. We've walked further down, leaving the Dissenters Chapel behind. To our right, which I've already covered, are the catacombs and the columbariums. Directly behind me is the modern crematorium. You will rejoin me at this spot for our next grave after we've covered this one. But for our next grave, it's up on that hill there. Second row in, and you're going to join me at the grave now. To give you a little trajectory of where we are, there's the chapel, the catacombs and columbariums. We've walked up onto the edge of the hill, And it's this row here, and he's a little further in that way. So join me at the grave. And this is the grave of Percy Thompson, who was murdered by his wife's lover. I've done a whole series around this murder case very recently, so if that's your thing, type in the story of Edith Thompson, London Luke on YouTube and you'll find that. But this is Percy's grave, sacred to the memory of our dear brother Percy Thompson, who died suddenly on October the 4th, 1922, aged 32 years. For him, peace at last. And Percy shares the grave with the cremated remains of his brother Richard Halliday Thompson, who was the owner of this grave. His name is at the foot of the grave here. And his sister Lily A. Chambers. And the interesting factor with Percy's grave is that, and Percy, he was buried on two separate occasions. First, he was buried in the grave that his wife had bought for him to be buried in. He had to be exhumed so they could check his remains for poison and ground glass, none of which was found, and Sir Bernard Spilsbury was involved in that one. Once he was exhumed, which occurred on the 3rd of November 1922, his family decided they didn't want him put back into the same grave that his wife had purchased for him, because at the time the world really blamed his wife for his murder, and so feelings were obviously running high. So he was exhumed and buried exhumed from his original grave and reburied here on the 3rd of November 1922. And this grave, very recently, did not look like this. I'll show you what it looked like now. And this is what Percy's grave looked like before it was cleaned up. And a picture of the man himself, Percy Thompson, in 1921. Let's move on with our tour now, shall we? Well, that's Percy Thompson covered, and I did say you would rejoin me at this spot. With the catacombs to our back, you're now going to want to, for our next grave, walk straight through here, which is the modern crematorium, which we've done. Walking past, which I wanted to show you, it's very tranquil pond and waterfall. And our next spot is over that way. Having walked through where the modern crematorium is, you'll turn around this way, and as I said, this cemetery is renowned for its architecture. It's one of the big cemeteries in London, and this gravestone, or vaultstone really, is one that's on a list of something that is architecturally magnificent. And you can see why, because the carving on it is really something quite amazing. It's Christ being borne down from the cross. And it is to the memory of, it's Nostro Caro Figlio, David John Vigiland, Royal Navy, died the 2nd of December 1946 in Monbasa, reinterred here on the 9th of December 1952, aged 20 years. His life will be as a guide to those who follow. And it covers a pretty large vault, really. We've now walked around the back, and it's got E in memoria della mia cara adorata moglie Lucy May Vigiland, died 8th of February 1962, aged 63 years. Mother of David John Vigiland, or Vigiland, Royal Navy, and John Vigiland, died 7th of February 1969, aged 72 years, husband and father of the above. And for us, there is David John Vigiland, his mother and his father. So for once I don't have to go online and search out images of them, because they are included here for us. And it is described as architecturally magnificent for a good reason. It's a beautiful stone, and it must have cost an absolute fortune, mustn't it? And while doing my research into David John Vigiland, I was able to come up with this very interesting little snippet from the Realms of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission's request page, and it leaves us with a very interesting and mysterious question. Janice Harris in New Zealand has recently requested an image from us of her relation's headstone, situated in Monbasa, Mbakari Cemetery in Kenya. This was a private memorial commemorating the death of Ordinary Seaman David Vigiland, who died of illness aged 20 whilst serving on HMS Chitterell. He was buried in the military cemetery section in 1946, but erected above his grave is a huge private family memorial, and not the standard Commonwealth War Graves headstone that Janice was expecting. Having checked our archive, he is officially commemorated in the City of London Cemetery here in the UK, and yet his grave, or former grave, in Monbasa is very well maintained, along with the other war graves. After David's death, his father John Vigiland started the fight to have David's body returned to England. He succeeded, and it was sent back to Britain and reinterred in the City of London Cemetery on December the 9th, 1952. Another huge sculptured monument was then commissioned, made of marble, which was finished and dedicated in 1955. The guided book of this cemetery describes it thus. Today's visit ended fittingly at the Vigiland Memorial, a single piece of white marble weighing in at over 20 tons. It was shipped from Italy to commemorate the death of the 20-year-old seaman David John Vigiland, whose family fought with the Commonwealth War Graves Commission for 10 years to allow them to repatriate his remains from Monbasa, where he had been serving as a seaman in the Royal Navy at the time of his death. Based on Raphael's painting, The Deposition, it is absolutely breathtaking, and one can only imagine how much it would have cost. The back of the monument presents a rather more sobering aspect, however. A set of cameos are set into the stone which depict David and his loving parents. Janice has found out through further research that David was the only child of her grandma's sister Lucy. David's parents were not rich people, his father being a hairdresser in the London Docks area, and yet where did the money come from for two memorials to their son? Let's be honest, two very splendid and what would have been extremely expensive memorials to their son, and that's the interesting mystery. Where did a hairdresser get the money from for this? Her task is to find out more, but it is proving a challenge. And here is HMS Chitterell, on which David served, and seen in World War II. And here, shown in 1955 when newly dedicated, is that amazing memorial in the City of London cemetery. And let's end off this segment with a last look at the face of David John Vigiland. This is one of those cameos that's on the back of the monument. And moving on to our next subject now. And for our next piece of architecture, you're going to join me just there. And this is the traditional church. I remember this one well, and of course for sad reasons, because cemeteries are sad places. This is where the funeral took place of my dear old neighbour and friend, Linda Ann Theobald, 1946 to 2023. And this is another William Haywood masterpiece, renowned for its architecture and particularly for its spire, which has gargoyles on it. He was a great fan of the medieval Gothic, was William Haywood. So throughout the course of our tour series, you've seen the traditional crematorium, the Dissenters' Chapel just now, the modern crematorium, and now you're seeing this one, which is the final building we will cover in our series. I'll give you a walk around of it. And it's every bit as architecturally stunning inside as it is outside. The chapels are only unlocked for funerals, so for obvious reasons I can't cover the insides of those. Many of you have said your final goodbyes to loved ones and friends at this cemetery will know what it looks like inside, and for those of you that haven't, it's architecturally amazing inside, put it that way. And here are its gargoyles. For a quick walk around this one before I take you off to our next set of graves, which are located in and around the traditional crematorium. It's having restoration work done on it at the moment, hence why it's screened off. Directly behind me is a lavatory for anyone that's caught short. It does have some beautiful stained glass in it at the altar windows there. And for reference purposes, And for those of you who've been following this tour all the way through, Winston Churchill's nanny is buried just over there. There is the chapel through the trees, and we couldn't walk by without paying our respects to Winston Churchill's nanny. Erected to the memory of Elizabeth Ann Etherest, who died 3rd of July 1895, aged 62 years, and it was erected by none other than Winston Spencer Churchill. And the bit that you can't see, because it's now covered over, is his brother John Spencer Churchill. So this is Winston Churchill's nanny. I'm back at the front of the traditional church now. I know I'd covered Nanny Everest before, but I couldn't resist going by without showing you to her, for those who may not have seen that particular coverage. Now, for our next set of graves, it is right over to the opposite side of the cemetery, over that way to the traditional crematorium, so join me over there for that. And for our next random but interesting one, you'll head to the traditional crematorium and you'll want to turn round and take the path to the right. Oh, beg your pardon, hay fever's playing up. And you'll want to be heading for that stone there, which is an interesting one. And like with our other video that encompassed the remains of people taken up from old London churchyards, this is one of those, but with an interesting tale to it. Here it is. The burial ground of the hospital for poor French Protestants and their descendants. Incorporated 1718. Here rest many children of the stranger whose last days were spent at the hospital or hospice founded by French Protestant refugees early in the 18th century for the reception and care of the poor and aged amongst their fellow exiles and their descendants. When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory, and before him shall be gathered all nations. And this stone, it's an interesting one. After the 1860 Union of Benefices Act, the way was clear for the demolition of many unused London churches and the reinterment in the new City of London cemetery, as planned by William Haywood, of those buried in unused churchyards many of which were required for the ongoing rebuilding of the City of London and the construction of the London Underground Railway. This marker is the site of the reinterment of the burials from the burial ground of the French hospital, originally founded to assist French Protestant refugees in the early 18th century. And here you have, in loving memory of our dear sister, Maud Margaret Tomlins, assistant nurse of the French hospital staff, loved by all, fell asleep 21st of May 1931, staff grave number 56444. So that's where many of the French Huguenot refugees would have originally been buried, in that burial ground, and they were taken up and moved here. Any historic images I can find or information relating to that will follow now. And researching into the old French hospital, I've been able to find some great images and some interesting information on it. 1718 saw the foundation of the first French hospital, called La Providence, incorporated by a royal charter and built in Bath Street on a site called Golden Acre in St Luke's Parish in Finsbury. Close to a natural reservoir called Peerless Pool, it could house up to 230 inmates, many of whom were former Spitalfields weavers. On a practical level, the hospital grew its own vegetables, kept chickens, and at one point raised pigs, and had its own bakehouse and brewery. It also had a chapel, and was amongst the first institutions in London to provide humane care and accommodation for the mentally ill. And here we see La Providence, the French Protestant hospital, Bath Street, St Luke's, view of the Western Quadrangle in about AD 1740. Quite where its burial ground was, I've not been able to find out, but it seems likely that it was somewhere within the grounds of the hospital. The second home of La Providence, built in 1866 on a rural site of 3.5 acres at Victoria Park in Hackney, and designed pro bono by the Huguenot architect Robert Louis Remieux, resembled a small French chateau in the Victorian Gothic style. It was designed to house fewer inmates, 40 women and 20 men, demand for places having dwindled since the days of the old Bath Street premises. Evacuated during the Second World War, the residents were never to return, since the building was requisitioned by the London County Council and later came under a compulsory purchase order. And here we see the second French Protestant hospital, La Providence, Victoria Park, erected in 1866, Robert Louis Remieux. And here is the building nowadays, thankfully still surviving. No longer, of course, the French hospital, but it's lovely to see that it still survives. Since 1959, under a new royal charter designating it as an almshouse, La Providence has been installed at Theobald Square on Rochester High Street, where the charity provides sheltered flats for its residents. And you can see here the French hospital is our sister charity. It was founded in 1718 as a charity for poor Huguenot refugees. Today it provides accommodation for Huguenot descendants in need. The French hospital is now situated in central Rochester. And on the side of this building is this plaque. 1718. This stone commemorates the 300th anniversary of the founding of the French hospital at La Providence, for the relief of poor French Protestant refugees, better known as Huguenots. On this site since 1959, the charity's almshouses continue to serve Huguenots and others. 2018. Now moving on to our next subject. And for our next interesting one that I was able to randomly find as I was walking around, you'll want to walk just around the side of the traditional crematorium and to the left, and it's a little way down the path and you'll find it here. It's pretty easy to find. In loving memory of William B. Fordham, aged 22, Ada Faulkner, aged 32, Florence Faulkner, aged 18, Sarah Thackeray, aged 29, Winifred Harrison, aged 22, Daisy Simmons, aged 19, and Paul McNally, aged 17, who lost their lives in the Ivy Lane fire of February 25th, 1904. Thy will be done seems hard to say when those we loved are called away. So, any information I can find on the Ivy Lane fire will feature now. And on the Ivy Lane fire, no images, which I'm kind of glad about, but I've been able to find these two interesting newspaper articles from the time. And the first one, awful London fire, 7 lives lost near St Paul's. In the early hours of the morning of February the 25th, a fire broke out in the neighbourhood of Ludgate Hill. Small in its proportions, but one of the most terrible in sacrifice of human life involved of any which has occurred in the city in recent years. Out of Paternoster Row on the left-hand side going up is a small thoroughfare known as Ivy Lane. Midway along is Duke's Head Passage, a narrow courtyard only some 10 or 12 feet across, with tall houses on either side. Shortly before 2 o'clock, flames broke out in the lower part of the premises of number 3, occupied by Mr. Fordham in the passage and used as a coffee shop. Within 20 minutes the premises had been burned out, while upstairs, in a third-floor room, lay the calciated, huddled heap of bodies of 5 women and 2 men, who only a few minutes before had been sleeping soundly in their beds after a hard day's work, for they were employees of the establishment. And our second one, fatal fire in the city. The resumed inquest on the bodies of 7 victims of the fire which occurred on the 25th at 3 Duke's Head Passage, Ivy Lane, EC, was held yesterday by Dr. Waldo, the city coroner, at his court on Golden Lane. It will be remembered that the fire broke out on the premises which were used as a coffee shop early in the morning and burnt with such rapidity that the place was practically gutted before the 5 women and 2 men who slept in the house could escape. Their bodies were subsequently found in a top room in which were a trapdoor and skylight, which in ordinary circumstances afforded easy access to the roof. The London County Council were represented by Mr. Godfrey, the City Corporation by Mr. Russell of the City Solicitor's Office, and the London Salvage Corps by Colonel Fox, and the owner, Mr. A.G. Fordham, by Mr. Gatehouse. The evidence of the divisional police surgeon showed that the attitude of the bodies was proof that death was due to suffocation and was painless, and that the burning followed after. So that's the tragedy of the Ivy Lane fire. We know it started in a coffee shop, and then it happened so quickly that they were overcome by smoke. And let's hope it was painless, eh? Hope you've all found the tours interesting and enjoyed them. And that covers us for this day's visit. As I say, there'll be other content in between, and then I'll come back over again soonish and do some more coverages. Thanks for watching, everyone.